All right, here we go. So welcome everyone. That took like a minute. That was weird. Welcome. We're gonna get started. I'm sure some people are, still filtering in here or there. Again, we're gonna be looking at the August 22. These will start to work a little bit better because we're like doing this cold right now, right? Once we start our actual Regents review in class, we'll have some nights where, like, for example, the night before, I might say, hey guys, do this multiple choice for homework from this year. And then obviously we can go over it a lot quicker. And we're actually like realistically able to finish a Regents in a single session. Now we're kind of just starting this from scratch, unless you did, for whatever reason, start it ahead of time. I did let you know, like around end of school time, like, hey, we'll be looking at this one. But we'll look at it together now. I had these up for the past few minutes for people that have been in here patiently since whatever it started, 6:59. Let's get going here. So number one, right off the bat, we have a function notation question. We call this, right? They give us f of x. It's 3 of x plus 4 all over 2, and they want to know f of 8. So this would be a question if you didn't, if you saw this for the very first time, you'd have like no idea what it's asking. So you did have to kind of learn this year. I think if you saw this last year, you would have had no idea. So this is function notation. So what they're basically asking us here is to plug in an 8. And what should we get if we substitute in an 8? If we substitute in an 8. Choice 3. Yeah, 14. I think this one might be interesting. Oh yeah, they didn't put that as a choice. Okay. I was gonna say people might type this into their calculator wrong and like basically hit this sequence of buttons, just for example. And I think most of you guys use the fraction button, so maybe not. But I was just thinking if someone kind of just types it in directly like that, you're not really dividing 3x plus 4 by 2, you're just dividing by 4. And they didn't even put that answer choice. That would have worked out to 26. But nonetheless, if you plug in an 8 here, you'd get 28 over 2 or 14. So you could use y equals, maybe some people would just use the home screen here. If x doesn't equal 0 for number 2, the common ratio of this sequence would be what? So first keyword there is, what does common ratio mean? Common ratio is, hey, what are you multiplying by each time? Okay, usually that's a number, like times 5. I think that was the one on the mock Regents, right? Times 5 times 5. What is the common ratio here? What are we multiplying by each time? There is a 2 involved. So is it 2 or 2x? If we look at our exponents, we are adding to that exponent each time. So it's not just 2, but 2x, choice 1. Very good. Number 3, factoring, we definitely need to go over. Some people were a little rusty with factoring. Some product. Here we have dots, difference of 2 squares. We have 6x plus 3, 6x minus 3, choice 3. Okay, dots, very, very common to be a multiple choice. Like what I said today, going over the mock with all my classes, you start to notice patterns or trends with these, right? I would say very common dots, multiple choice early on. This test, I just looked it over to remind myself. There's what did we call it in class? A conversion question towards the end. You get like deja vu, I guess would be a good way of describing it, because like every test, it feels like this might be the mock. Like, oh wait, didn't we just do that? But it's a slightly different question. So there's a lot of common trends to pick up on. For number 4, this was a part 2 question on the mock, and we were a little rusty with it. The idea of like what makes something a function. Choice 4 here would work. Basically, we don't want a repeated x value. The other 3 choices would lead to a repetition. Okay, with functions, we want x values to be unique, inputs to be unique. All right. So we'll look at a few multiple, I said this earlier if you came in a little late, we're gonna like jump around in the August 22. I'll do the same thing as last week where we'll try to go through the multiple choice a little bit quicker and then leave some time for the end. Without even looking at it yet, what do we want to take a guess? What do you think the very last question on this Regents is? What topic would you guess the very last question? It's a system. It's a system, yeah, right? A money-related system. Oh, it costs this much. Oh, this costs this much. Find out how much it costs. And part B is going to be like, Joe thinks this. Is he correct? Yeah, this test looks. Ooh, okay. Mm, mm, a few weird ones in here, but okay. Um, let's get back to this. So I guess we'll do these two. They've been up on the screen. Maybe you already did them. It says if the point k, -5, lies on the line of the equation 3x plus y equals 7, what is the value of k? So we could substitute in here. K is going to represent x, and -5 is going to represent y, and just solve. This is basically like a two-step equation. Add the 5 over, and k will be 4. And polynomial operation question number 5. Yeah, just substitute in, add the 5 over, excuse me, and you'll get k equals 4. And for number 6, a polynomial question, you're distributing a 1/3 and also an x. For question 30 on the mock, we check what is there a number in front of the bubbles? Huh? Oh, is this what you're asking, Maddie? Like, what is it not factored? Technically, like number 3, I think this is what you're asking, is not factored completely. Is that what you're getting at? Like, if number 3 was a part 2 question and it said factor this completely, if you just put 3, that would be, I guess, like partially correct because you could pull out a 3 if that's what you were saying. Like, if I put this question without any choices and I said, hey guys, factor this completely, I would say start with a GCF and then you get this. And now you could still do dots, it's just going to look different. I know this wasn't what the question was asking. I think this is what you're asking. Okay, how do I know choice 3 is, well, it's the answer to this question. How do I know it's not factored completely? Because they still have something in common. 6 and 3 still have something in common. So yeah, it's kind of a bad multiple choice because some people might look at that and be like, wait, isn't that like not fully correct? It just says equivalent, to be fair. It doesn't say like factored completely. For number 6, you would multiply by 1/3 while also adding 1 for all your exponents. Whenever I'm doing an exponent question, I like to tack on that little 1 just as a reminder. And what do we get here? Choice 3, I believe, right? Yeah. So you're getting 2x cubed when you add x and x squared. You're adding exponents, sorry, when you multiply. X times x gives you x squared. 1/3 of 9 is 3, and the x just kind of glues on there. Anytime this hack works for more questions than you think. Obviously, this is easy enough where we would probably just do it. But let's pretend for a moment. Anytime a question asks about equivalence, one option you have is just using y equals. Okay, typing this in as y1 and y2, let's say, and then just going to your table and seeing, hey, do these actually work out to the same thing? If your tables are exact matches, they're equivalent. You'd be surprised how many questions that could answer. Like even on this first page, it could have helped you with number 3 if you were totally blanking out, right? There's probably a bunch more throughout the test. So a lot of calculator tricks we'll focus on over the next, we don't want to just use tricks for every question. I'm throwing these out as like a worst case. Number 7, which of these functions has a 0 at 2 and -3? So first of all, what are zeros again? What are zeros? Roots, yeah, zeros are roots, x-intercept, where it hits the x-axis. So which one has a 0 at 2 and -3? 2 and -3. Choice 3. A lot of 3s so far. Is that 4 or 5? Three, four threes in the first seven questions. Um, okay. Pretty easy I think that was the gist with like the mock too. Like multiple choice is not so bad. Sometimes there's like one weird one or something like that. Let's take a look at these two. Try these two out. I'll give you guys a minute if you want to read them or try them on your own. And we will skip a little bit through the multiple choice. Second trace. Yeah, you don't have to use trace there. What would you even enter in? Oh, how to find zero. Mm, mm, mm. All right, these are relatively quick. What's the constant term for that expression? What's the constant term? Constant term is a number without any variable attachment. So the six here, which would be choice one, choice one. We have a what do we want to call this? Growth/decay question. Emily was given $600. She earns interest, so growth, 2.4%, yada, yada, yada. Which one models how much she'll have after 4 years? Okay. So I would look through all the choices, right? They're all very similar. Like the four is an exponent in all of them, so that doesn't make a difference. The 600's out front, which is where it should be. That's the principal amount. The difference is whether or not you're adding or subtracting. So knowing that alone gets rid of half the field, right? We said it's growth, the word earned. So what's the answer? One or three here? Choice three. Yeah. If you want to turn a percent into a decimal, you could simply divide it by 100 if you're not 100% sure with that, no pun intended, or just move it like two jumps back. I think I said last week, right? Take the decimal, move it two little jumps back. Do we get like the thingy? What did that say? For number 9, do we get like the thingy we used to plug it in? Huh? The formula? The growth formula? Is that on the reference sheet? I think it is. I mean, it didn't really. Is it? Yeah, it's not on there. There is a growth formula, but it's from like algebra 2. It's not the algebra 1 growth or decay formula. All you need to, it's not a very complicated one. That's the principal 1 plus or minus r to the t power. Plus or minus, plus if it's growth, minus if it's decay. All right, I'm going to skip a little bit. Ooh, why don't we try this? This is good practice. We're gonna go back to stat. We've been off of statistics for like a week, it feels like. But we're gonna get back into that mode tomorrow. We're gonna lock in. We got a test Tuesday in statistics. So good little review here. This is a two-way table. Now there was a two-way table. If you want to try this one. RIP my Apple Pencil. If you want to try this while I'm talking, this is a two-way table. There was one on the mock Regents, but it didn't really require like the complexity of the two-way tables we saw on, was that Friday or Monday? Like this question where like the phrasing gets very confusing, right? Take a minute, try this one. Based on this survey, what percent of students prefer pizza? What percent of students prefer pizza? What's a two-way table? This is a two-way table. There's two variables. In this case, it would be gender and I guess your favorite food, favorite lunch food or something. Yeah, we have a test on Tuesday. Why does no one know that? Okay, here you would need to first know how many students there are. So how many students are there in this table? There's exactly 200. Okay, that makes it easy. You would just add everything up. Sometimes they give you that little total row or column here. It's not. So you would just add up all the numbers. It's 200. Now, of those 200, how many more? How many prefer pizza? It looks like our ops 74. So you would say 74 out of 200. Now you could just simply do the division there. That will make it a percent for you. It's going to make it a decimal. You could divide it by 2. You could do a bunch of different things there. 74 divided by 2, 37. And they put sneakily, they put 74 as an option. That would probably be the most incorrect one because maybe people just don't know how to do these. So you always want to be extra careful with the phrasing. I always say, like, think about what's your out of, think about what your denominator is. The numerator with two-way tables is usually the easier part. So focus on the out of. Hey, what is this out of? In this case, it's everybody. I could have said it as like, what percent of males prefer pizza? Then I just would have added up the male, the bottom row, and said like 30 out of whatever that is. Are there 100 of each? 100 males? Yeah. Okay. All right, let's skip around. Da, 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 da. Ooh, let's try this one. 15 is a good one. CTS was not very well received on the mock regions, not very remembered. So for this one, it just wants to know, this is really, I guess, testing if you know how to do CTS because you don't actually have to solve it. They just want to know like the middle move, the middle look of it, let's say. So if you were doing CTS to number 15, spend 20 minutes on this. Okay. CTS is very step by step if you remember how I do it. Some of you have people you work with, tutor, someone at home, mom or dad, that do it slightly different. That's fine. So how I like to do it is I move the constant over. Okay. Some people like to keep it there. I just prefer, I find it easier to get it out of the way. And now what you're going to do is add that magic number. You don't literally have to do this. This is just like a little memory thing. Doesn't actually have a purpose. That number that you're going to add to both sides is half of b. You don't have to care. You don't care about the sign. So half of 10 would be 5, and then square it. That's why I said you don't care about the sign. So the magic number here would be 25. Okay, I think that's what it was on the mock as well. It was like, looked like this. And now, what does this look like as a bubble? When I say bubble, a binomial squared, what does this look like as a bubble? X minus 5. What's the relationship between the trinomial and the bubble? Can anyone tell me that? What's the relationship between the trinomial and the bubble? Good. The answer is going to be choice 1 here. I was looking for like a shortcut. What's the relationship between, I'll highlight what I'm talking about. What's the relationship between this and this? Or no, wait, I lied. What's the relationship between this and this? This is what I'm getting at. Yeah, it's always half. You don't actually have to sit and do, like, technically you're doing some product, but we're using a little shortcut here because it's going to be the same bubble twice. We could just cut it in half. Again, technically you would have to do, hey, what adds up to -10 and multiplies to 25? Take a little bit of time. Or, hey, if this is going to be a duplicate bubble, that's why we put the squared, because this is technically x minus 5, x minus 5. Because it's a duplicate bubble, I could just cut to the chase here. Hey, it's going to be half. I'm splitting it into 2 equal groups. I have 10 M&Ms, and I'm splitting them into 5 and 5, right, with the same sign. So it's -10, so it's -5 and -5. Okay? And don't forget about it became 38. I don't know, where would they get 12? Oh, if you kept it as -13, I guess. You did 25 minus 13. So yeah, don't forget about the math on the right. We did have to add it to both sides. Is there any scenario where it won't be half? Nope. Yep, it'll always be half. Yeah. Like if this was your work, this is fun. It's not a trick, right? Like you're showing that she's asking like if this was a written question and you did this, would they be like, oh, you didn't do it right? No, like you factored it. You don't have to show like the sum product chart because even that's like a trick, right? It's just a way of helping you remember. Okay, let's skip. Ooh, maybe we'll do 17. That's a good one. Like 17. All right, I'm going to leave this up for a beat here, give you guys time. I like these Roman numeral ones. It says, which of the equations below have the same solution? And then we have 3 Roman numeral choices. So while you're trying this, how do you have to kind of do this question? How do you have to do this? Can I just look at this and like know the answer semi immediately? Yeah, so it's a little bit of an annoying one because it's like 3 questions in one. You kind of just have to solve all 3. There's not some weird trick where they're like, oh, that's the same equation and it's just like times 2. These are all totally different looking, at least to my eye here. So you do have to solve all of these and then just compare them. X equals question mark. So solve for each one, and then we'll see which. It looks like at least 2 of them have something in common, or all 3 of them the same. 3 might be the easiest. Let's do that. So how can you solve for this? I would just do times 3. That gets rid of the 1/3. And times 3, that's going to give me 9/2, or 4.5. Maybe we could use logic to figure out the rest. So if you were solving Roman numeral 1, you could divide by 10 or distribute. You get 10x minus 50 equals negative 15. 10x equals add 50 to negative 15, and you'll get 35. And divide by 10. So 1 and 3 are going to be different. That would be 3.5. It's not choice 2. But we do have to figure out Roman numeral 2. That would be 5. 2x minus 4 equals 5. 2x equals 9, or x equals 4.5. So this question probably would have been like challenging for people where it was. What does that look weird? Challenging for people where it really wasn't that bad. It was just like, hey, how do I do this? Oh, I just actually have to solve all 3. So which 2 are the same here? Roman numeral 2 and 3. Roman numeral 1 was 3.5. Close, but no good. So 2 and 3, which choice is that? Choice 3? A property question. That's something you're like, oh man, I did the properties like all the way back in elementary school. They do sneak these in every so often. They're not super difficult, but just a little unusual because we don't see them that often. So someone was solving an equation. He wrote 2 parentheses, blah, blah, blah. And then he wrote that. So I always say with these questions, like, first of all, think what happened. So what happened? Okay, he had like a quadratic. What is he doing in in the first step where he's writing 2 parentheses? So what he's doing is factoring, right? It's called. And then what happened to that 2? So it looks like he just divided by 2 on both sides. Why can't I spell? Divide by 2. Now that we have like fancier names for these. So what properties did he utilize here? When he divided by 2 on both sides, that's easy. That's just called the division property of equality. So like when you add something to both sides, the addition property of equality. When you subtract by something, subtraction property. He divided by 2. What would you call factoring? You don't think of it this way. Factoring is really the distributive property, yeah. Because what it is the distributive property backwards. So it is technically the distributive property. Because what justifies it is, hey, I can multiply this out and it's the same thing. So it's the distributive property and the division property. So choice 4. Commutative property would be like switching the order. He didn't switch the order of anything, and he also didn't add anything on both sides. Okay, and we'll do one more. Ooh, perfect. Couldn't have planned it better. So we've seen now this is our third one. If you attended last week, you had one of these on the mock, right? I think some people picked it up, people that attended last week, how to do these. It does not involve a calculator. It doesn't involve, I think some people get thrown off because your reference sheet has all like the conversions on it. Maybe you're thinking like, oh, I gotta know how many feet are in a mile and blah 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 blah. Right? How do we do these questions? Cancel out units. Yeah, look for what you want. So what you want here is, I think this is what our mock was too. Usually it's like somewhat different. It's just coincidence here. It's another miles per hour question. So take a minute. Which one cancels out and just leaves you with miles in the numerator and hours in the denominator? Which one cancels out, leaving you with just miles per hour? Choice 2 people are saying. Let's look at like choice 3. Meters, meters, feet, feet. And you're left with miles, but per minute. We don't want miles per minute. So that one's pretty close. Let's see. People are saying 2. Uh, meters, meters, minute, minute, feet, feet. What are we left with? Miles per hour. We don't care about the numbers at all. Choice 2. I remember like the first time this question was given, even like I was looking at the test, I see it right when you guys do. I don't get like a head start or anything like that. Um, and I was panicking, almost like, ooh, this is like, where's this coming from? It's like so out of left field. But now it's become so common that it's given every year. I just boil it down to this trick, and it's really not that bad. I think by doing the practice regions, a lot of people have picked up on that. Like, hey, I don't actually have to know how to convert this. I just have to be aware of my units and what I end with. So we'll wrap up the multiple choice there, which is perfect timing. It's right away, right around the halfway point. We did, I would say, what, about half of them? So you do have 24 in your multiple choice. A correlation question I see here, right? We should know how to do that now. That's that R value on our calculator. A literal equation that came up on the mock. That was like one of our lowest scoring questions. My students last year, also probably on the mock, a lot of people got 22 wrong. A literal equation. But we'll draw the line here. We'll start looking at some written. We'll look at some and like focus or zone in on one or two in the part 2 here at least. So graphing an absolute value to start, nothing really that crazy there. Make a table, make sure you have arrows on it. I like to do some of the strange ones. Would this table be closer to a linear or exponential? Why don't I try this one? This one's not bad. Okay, so they give us a table of values. The thing to keep in mind with part 2, this is why I think it's so important to like be familiar with how things are graded and scored. This is a 2-point question, right? You just putting, it's kind of like a 50-50. You just putting linear exponential is worth nothing here. It's more so it comes down to your explanation. Okay, how are you going to explain, hey, which type of model works better here? We did lessons on this, like linear versus exponential, right? Doesn't have to be exact, but just generally speaking, which one do you think works better? Also, maybe look at some, I'll pull them up on my laptop actually. Some model responses. I think it's nice to look at those. I'll go over like, hey, this is what got it too. Sometimes you could keep things simple. One of my tips today with going over the mock was like less is more sometimes. Like this question says explain. So do you have to write in words? Yeah. Do you have to write like 5 paragraphs? No. So it is exponential. Very good. So now how are we going to explain that? I think personally how, because it's a little tricky, right? Like, ooh, how do you don't have to get into numbers. So you don't have to be like, well, technically it's blah, 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 because it's not even going to be exact. Oh, very good. I like Sean. That's exactly what I was going to say. Sean just said, sometimes it's easy to prove something by like disproving that it's not the other thing. So if you're confused, like, how can I say this is exponential? It might be easier to say why it's not linear. Yeah, Jamin, unfortunately, you can't just say because it's not linear, because then my question would be like, how do you know? It's not constant, right? The rate of change is it's dropping from it's dropping about $10,000, right? The first 5 years. Then it drops 5,000. Then it drops, I'm eyeballing here, like 2,000 ish, right? So it's basically getting cut in half each time. But yeah, a nice clean way of doing this would just be saying, hey, it's exponential, and the rate of change is not constant. No constant ROC, rate of change. Okay, that explanation, I know I wrote very sloppy and brief here, but that would be perfect. Like even in the model responses I'm looking at, this got a 2 out of 2. An exponential function would be more appropriate because there is no constant rate of change. Okay, this got a 2 out of 2. Exponential because, oh, same thing. Why did they put 2 of that? This got a 1. Let's see what a 1 looks like. A linear function because there isn't a constant rate of change. So maybe they kind of just made a mistake and wrote linear by accident. This got a 0. Linear because there is a constant decay. It doesn't make a ton of sense there. So keep things brief. Don't go crazy trying to over explain something. The reason why I say that, because if you write this long explanation, if there's any slight error in there, we have to hold you accountable for that. What if I say I graphed it? You're gonna graph 20,000 or like rough sketch? Might need a really big piece of graph paper in your head. The slope, the rate of change. Yep. Yeah, like I said, I think the best, there's a number of ways you can answer this. This isn't obviously the one answer, but you could even start talking about like, hey, it has a constant multiplier of roughly a half, it looks like. But then again, you don't even have to get into values. All right, another classic two-pointer. I don't think we had this on the mock, rational versus irrational, right? So another 50-50 type thing where it comes down to, hey, how do you back this up? Now this one instead says justify. What is there's still people that are a little confused with that. What does justify mean? Because there is an overlap between explain and justify. Doesn't mean prove, kind of. Yeah, justify is usually more like show your work, basically, whereas explain is more so like, ELA question, like right in a sentence. For justify, you can just technically be like da 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 math work. There you go, right? You don't need a closing line or something like that. Okay, how do we usually do these? You could actually figure out what it works out to. Doesn't actually ask you to find that. So to be clear, like you don't have to find the product here, but I think that's probably a good way of doing it. So what is 8 times 98? Because you can multiply what's underneath them. 784? Yeah. And is 784 a perfect square? What is the square root of 784? If you're not sure if something's a perfect square, take the square root of it. If it works out to an integer, it is. If it doesn't, then it's not. Looking at the model response is a little surprising for this one. I feel like there's always like some things that this came up on the mock. There's a question, people got like angry, like, oh, you didn't have to label for this one. So like some things they give you, I guess it can't hurt you, but I would just be like, oh, I wouldn't give that full credit. So it works out to 28. A bunch of people are saying that someone on the model responses literally just did this and they got a 2 out of 2. Which doesn't make a ton of. Oh, I guess yeah, they circled the word rational. I don't love that. So I would say like you can add a little. We said justify means show your work or like prove it, basically, right? But this is where there's an overlap. You could like write some words down. It's not like you can only talk in numbers. And I guess this suffice. They're counting this as a 2 out of 2. If we are asked to explain something a little bit more clearly with rational, I would say think of the first 5 letters. Okay. If you're asked to explain ratio of 2 integers, or in this case, 28, you could even just say is an integer, is a whole number, right? And all whole numbers are rational. So always go back to that first 5 letters. It's a ratio of two integers. Basically, it could be written as a fraction, right? That's what makes something rational. You don't need the plus or minus. Yeah, it's not getting into that. That would be like when we think about solving a quadratic. Okay. Interquartile range, you would use 1 var stats, Q3 minus Q1 there. Let's get into some, ooh, let's do this. This is a good, like, hey, let's take a few minutes to solve this. Okay, we always want to read instructions, and this is a 2-pointer, wow. Ugh. Sometimes 2-pointers are not like equitable, right? Like that was a 2-pointer, now this is a 2-pointer. I would say like you can make this a 4-pointer. It says solve this equation algebraically for all values of x, rounding to the nearest tenth. Okay, so algebraically, we want to show work. I can't just use my calculator or some hack, right? So I got to show work. That's part one. Two, it's telling me to round, so I want to be aware of that. If it said like exact values, then I would leave radicals. If it didn't say anything, I would assume that it probably works out nicely. Because this one is saying nearest tenth, what is that giving us a clue to? Yeah, this probably doesn't work out. So how do we want to solve this? Quad formula. Okay, take a minute. I'll stop talking for a second. Take a minute. Quad formula to nearest tenth. Do you even need to bother simplifying when a question asks to round it? No. So you don't need to simplify the radical. You could just jump right into your calculator. Who should we check to see if they're paying attention? I like to play this game sometimes. Who should we catch? Who should we catch? Samuel? Samuel, type in the chat if you're there. Oh, Samuel's there. Okay, good job. Who else? Oh, all these people are good. Elijah? Elijah, you there? I don't know what you guys are talking about. I do not play Roblox. No. I don't really play any games. Okay, if you substitute in here, you'll get negative b, so that would become positive 5, plus or minus, da, 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 da. We always have issues with the radical. I'm going to write it the wrong way first. This is what people do, and then they get negative 25, and they're like, why did I get this wrong? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, good point, Kristen. So what you need to do here is just think about, hey, if I'm squaring something, it should be positive, or just throw parentheses around it. B squared minus 4ac. Okay, what does your radical work out to? And then I'm going to need someone's help that has a calculator on them. So that's going to be 25 plus 84, right? And that's what, 109, right? Am I crazy? Don't answer that. And now what does that work out to? Not even going to bother simplifying that. It doesn't. So we would do 5 plus rad 109 divided by 6, 5 minus rad 109 divided by 6. So you'd have to enter this twice into your calculator. So I mean, it's a lot of work for a 2-point question. And I believe you should get 2.6. I'm looking at the model. 2.6 and negative 0.9. One thing that I'll say, so getting a 1 out of 2 is like a rounding error. Like they have one where the kid rounded to the nearest hundredth. Oh, wow, this got a 1 out of 2. So this kid just used his calculator and then drew a picture of his calculator, like using the 0 function. I'm surprised that gets even a 1. And that's about it. Okay, so I guess if you come up with the answer somehow, you get a 1 here, and you're not showing your process. But one thing I talked about, I think it was the one that said exact values on the mock. You want to be very clear with what you're highlighting your answer down as. Because let's say, I don't know why someone would do this. This is a bad example here, but like something like this, it wouldn't really apply to this question, but like, circling everything. Because then the question is like, hey, which one is the answer here? Some people did that with that exact value one. They wrote like the radical and then they had the decimals next to it. And now I have to mark that wrong because I don't know if you know the difference between the two. Okay. All right. And I want to do this one. We're really doing a lot of part twos here, and then we'll do. Let's see how much time we have left. Factoring completely. A lot of people wrote IDK, uh, help me God or something under the factoring completely question on the mock regents, right? We totally forgot about this. We're a little rusty with it. Haven't done it in a while. Factoring did come up with quadratics, but not extensively. Um, so when you see that word completely, what does that tell you? When you see that word completely, what is that getting at first? Yeah, you're gonna factor more than once, right? Otherwise, why would they say completely? Wouldn't they just say, hey, factor this? So, how would you start here? How would you start factoring? Divide out of three, yeah. Some of you guys were like doing some weird like solving moves. You don't have to solve anything with this. And what's 288 divided by 3? 96, I think. You're not solving anything here, so don't like make this into an equation. Don't start throwing out zeros and roots. It's just factoring. Factoring is just a remold of it, right? Don't get into solving. Leave quadratics and factoring like separate. If something says solve, then we solve. If something says factor, we're just manipulating how it looks. I did simplest radical form. Yeah, a bunch of people did that, Josephine, not just you. And now, how would you factor what's rest? What's rest? What's left? How would you factor what's left? So if you did this, would you get a 1 and a 2? Probably. You just divide out of 3? I'm assuming. Um, some product, very good. Some product. What adds up to -4 and multiplies to -96? It's going to be a positive and a negative, right? That's the only way to get a negative product. And your numbers here would be -12 and +8. So you want to put it all together now. You don't want to lose that 3 from step 1. And we're going to get 3 parentheses y minus 12, y plus 8. You can always check your work with these. You couldn't multiply it out, or again, you could type this into y1, type your answer into y2, let's say, and just double check that they work out to the same table. When you factor an expression, just like when you simplify an expression, it should still be the same thing. We're not changing anything about it. I thought the negative 4 was... that was before Google Classroom. We had it's so strange to think about, but before COVID, the Google Classroom didn't exist, or it did, but like it was in its beginning phase. Teachers just would have like a WordPress or like their own website. So I actually used a Google site, I think it was called. I didn't even know that was still up. So that's probably from like 2019. Yeah, and it was really just a way of like posting worksheets and you know making posts of what the homework was. There was no like I couldn't see who was accessing it. So like other kids that had other teachers would use my site to look at things or study. Okay, so that was our part twos. The older ones, like this one had 8 part twos. Yours is only gonna have 6. We've talked about that, so there's a few more there. Now we're in the part 3 land. I'm not gonna do this question because you did a very similar one in your mock, and we actually did very well on this, graphing a quad linear system. So we did a very similar question to this. I always say make a table for the quad just to have it there. Some of you graph right on your calculator, off your calculator, that's fine, but make the table on the paper. You don't need it, but it just helps. For any line, use M and B, or you could use a table, worst case. And always make sure you're answering a question. Here, they're just asking for the X value. So this is a good example of, hey, if you give the coordinate, they're going to take off. They just want to know the X value. And then it says explain. I guess you could say like, hey, whatever the number is, because they intersect at 2, 5, one X value would be 2, something like that. Okay, I'm gonna skip. All right, let's try this. Obviously, you don't have graph paper readily available. Maybe you do, but we'll kind of do this together. A lot of people commented that they were, again, this was another topic that was off the radar for us a little bit. Graphing a system of inequalities. We only do coordinate when if it doesn't say anything, then you give a coordinate. What is d rice 206? What? My Gmail? That's not my Gmail. Oh, welcome to the 2022. I guess maybe I updated this at first. That's weird. So let's go over this. So what I would do here, get things in Y form and do one at a time. It's a little overwhelming when you try to take it all in. So what did I do? I moved the 3x over. Now with these, I like to do 4 bullet points. Yes, write them down, as silly as it sounds. So what's the slope? -3/1. What's the y-intercept? 5. Line type here would be dotted, dashed, whatever you want to call it. And the shading would be below. How do you shade? Shading is like word association. So if you say less than out loud, kind of makes sense. It goes hand in hand that that's below. So I'm going to graph the line. I'm going to hold off on graphing the I'm going to hold off on doing the shading because I like to do the selective shading. That is like, I like to anticipate where they're going to overlap and then just shade that. There's nothing wrong with if you do shade the other way. This is dotted, so as I'm connecting it, I would lay my ruler down and just pick up my pen every so often, my pencil. You do want to use pencils on any graphing question. You're technically supposed to do the other written questions in pen, but graphs in pencil, because if you mess up, this way you can still erase it. Okay, I'm also going to label right away so I don't forget. And now for the other one, so I'm going to hold on. I'll do like a little line like this, like that will be below, and I'll erase it later. For the other one, it's written a little weird, which could be an issue. Because then we get into like flipping the sign and stuff like that. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to remedy that just by adding the Y to the left. Otherwise, if I write it with the Y on the right, then it looks really weird, and the shading rules don't apply, and do I have to divide by a negative? It's a lot of craziness. So I'm just going to move the Y over and then move the 1 back over. So I'm like switching the 1 and the Y, if that makes sense. And now this was written normally. It doesn't really matter with equations, but with inequalities, you want the Y on the left, because then, again, shading and all that stuff gets weird. Again, make my 4 bullet points. Shade above. Line type here would be solid. Okay. And again, I'm going to begin at -1, up 2/1. Solid line, you could just make normal. You want arrows or go to the edge of your paper. We did talk about that with one class today. Okay, and I'm going to label this one. Technically, with labeling, you do only have to do 1. And this one is shaded, where do we say? Above. Okay, So if the other line was below and this one's above, I'm going to do this, make a little Wi-Fi symbol thing. I'm just indicating that this is my solution region. The instructions here actually say given S. I think the one on the mock didn't, and most of you did it anyway, which is perfectly fine. It's a little strange actually that it didn't say that. Because I would say majority of time that I've seen this question, it does ask you to label it with the S. Okay. Just try to be neat with these. I did have someone, I'm not going to say who it was, but they did this shit. I said, like, don't do this. They did the shading that looks like this, and you took like a charcoal pen from Miss Stoger. Um, what if you end up changing something? You're like, oh man, I shaded the wrong way. Then you have to erase that, like, uh, crazy ink marks or pencil marks that are all over the place. So keep it nice, nice lines. There's no real rule or reason with that. Like how spaced out do they have to be, or how many lines do you need? As long as it's clear that someone looks at it and they know where the answer is. I don't know, Ethan. It was an analogy, man. Um, your captions say cursor. If you didn't put the S, would you get credit off? If it didn't say no, yeah. If it doesn't say, you don't have to. Like the mock didn't say, and you didn't have to. People did it just out of habit, and that's fine. Like people know what that means. Like any teacher would know what the S thing is. What did I say? That sound like that. Shaded. Um, Questions with this? And there is a follow up. There's usually going to be a follow up with this. In this case, it says it's like one of two things. Hey, name a point in the solution set, justify or explain what it is. Here they give you a point. I feel like maybe not. Usually they give you one like right on the fence. This one is at -50, which isn't in the solution set. So how would you explain that? Is it fine if you shade both on? Yeah, yeah. I said earlier, I like to do it this way. That's just preference. I find it neater. If you shade everywhere and do normal, that's like the more common way. That's perfectly fine. Yes, it's in the solution region. I'm just going to abbreviate solution region for both. I see this a lot, so I'm going to make a mistake here and do it. I had a kid get a 99 because of this reason. Brandon Lynn, if anyone knows Brandon, shout out Brandon. Yeah, it's an inequality. I don't know why. Maybe you're just used to saying system of equations or something like that, but inequalities. Also, some of you guys, I was a little lenient with this, but you wrote like some explanation like, yes, it's in the shaded region. And then it's a little like, oh, going back to Emily's question, like this is a shaded region down here. So you do want to be a little bit more clear than that. I don't think it took off if you wrote that. So I would just make sure it's clear that it's in like the double shaded region, the shaded region for both. Yeah, he plays volleyball. Um, okay, make sure that it's clear that you're saying for both. I think a lot of people just wrote it's in the shaded region. Not super clear. All right, and we'll close with this. We may end up going a little bit over. System we did pretty okay with. There were some people that like did the top two parts and then got a little fell off at the bottom. So we'll set it up together. We have small and large Sunday. Some big numbers here, so we'll talk about how we can clean this up. 30 small. Always use the letters they give you. I think some people use like L and D on the mock because it was like latte and donut. They're telling you use X and Y. It doesn't take off for that, but then it just gets confusing for someone grading it. Excuse me. Also, you may be more likely to make a mistake. Okay, this one shouldn't be that bad. Maybe we'll leave it like this. I was gonna say, like, my first instinct was to like divide out of 10 or clean these up, but I'm noticing, I don't know about you guys, like the 30 and 15, that's kind of nice and easy. I don't have to do a double. I could just hit this bottom one. What would you multiply the bottom one by? If you show S, could you say? No, Kristen, that's what I was going back to. Technically, like if you shade it everywhere, like Emily asked, like most people do. I don't know if a lot of us do the selective shading. You want to make sure that you're saying either like the uh, it's in the solution region for both, it's in the overlapping, something along those lines. No, Maddie, they wouldn't. Yeah, I would multiply the bottom one by -2. Let's try Peyton's thing here. Let's see if we could be sneaky. I said this in class today. I forgot which class. Usually when they give you this like check if it works question, usually the trick is that it works for one of them and then it doesn't work for the other one. So we could be a little clever and just skip to the second one because they would probably make the first one work. I honestly don't even know if this is the case. Maybe it doesn't even work for both. But this is usually what I just do because it's such a pattern of like, okay, it works for the top one, and now let me try the bottom one. Let's just cut to the bottom one. And can someone help us out with that? Is there a website with all the past regions on it? Yeah. I'm going to be, once we're done with statistics, I'm going to like retool Google Classroom a little bit. I'll send it right here. This is that site. Goes all the way back to June. Don't go crazy with like, it's not like illegal or wrong with anything, but don't dig too much yet because some of these will be assignments. I may say like, hey, work on this, work on this. We're going to get the little green books that have some of the recent ones. But yeah, it's very useful to have that site to look at the model responses, things like that. It works out to thank you, Justin, 277.50. So we would say, no, he's wrong. Okay. I'm assuming the top one probably worked if you checked it with that. So you could be a little clever sometimes. Oh, it doesn't? And now solving it. Did it work out? Okay. I think that worked out. Someone else, if you want to check that, Justin, I don't know if you were saying no to the answer or not. I always find it silly because the next part says solve it. So obviously it doesn't make sense for you to say yeah. People on the mock like said yes for the middle part, which doesn't really make a ton of sense. Okay, you're good. So solving this, I would multiply the bottom one by -2. So sometimes you want to like divide out a GCF, which I was initially going to do, but then I noticed, hey, this works out kind of nicely. Let's just keep it as big numbers. I'm multiplying the bottom one by -2. That's what, -540. Add these together, we get -20y equals -120. And y equals 6. Once you have one value, you're going to go back to one of your originals to find the other. So let's say the top one, 50 times 6 equals 420. That would be 30x equals 120, or x equals 4. No, they wouldn't specify. They'll just say algebraic. So hey, I'm showing a process. These work out very nicely. Like the ones on your mock were a little confusing. It was like $2.95 and $1.85. These work out to integers. You kind of have a little closing line. So what was X? A small sundae and 6 for a large. Always make your answers very clear. It makes it very easy to someone to grade. Has there ever been a time the person is correct? No, because then that would give you the answer to part C. They've given like other things in the middle. Besides just like check this. I'm trying to think of another example. There's a coin one where it had you do something different. I think we did that question, the one with like quarters and nickels. And then it was like, does he have enough money to afford this if his mom gave him all quarters? Sometimes they'll switch it up a little bit. What do the it just means like the answer. Means technically it means therefore. We'll still get full credit if I do y equals x equals. Yep. You don't need that sentence. What if we mix up the bottom statement? Will a point be taken off? What do you mean? Like if you said 4 large and 6 small? Yeah, I guess. That'd be like a silly mistake. These are kind of, someone was asking this. It's not an exact science, but it's kind of like 2, 2, 2. It doesn't work out exactly like that. There's some like, transitive property with some stuff. Like you could get a 3 some weird ways, but yeah, it's kind of like 2, 2, 2. So just setting it up, you get a 2, being able to correctly, kind of justify or show something for is the person correct, and then the solving parts were 2. Could you have divided by 10 once you multiply the top equation by, once you multiply the second equation by -2? Why would you have done that, lady? Could you have divided by 10 once you multiply the second equation by -2? I just left them as is because I was getting the 30 and -30. If you were going to clean it up, you'd want to do that right away. Like, oh, let me just make it 3x plus 5y equals 42. Um, and then you could have done something like times -5, let's say, to create positive and -15. So you have a bunch of options. I really wouldn't want to mess with the y's here because anything with y is going to require a double elimination. That means like multiplying both equations. So I would probably focus on x. All right. Should we do one more sleep check? Who's sleeping? Someone give me a name to check. Sleep check. Emily. Oh, Emily's here. You were sleeping? Jay. Oh, Jeremy's here. Jeremy, type in the chat if you're here. I think he left. Is Jeremy here? Iris, type in the chat if you're here. Iris, type in the chat. No sleep check, please. Sleep check for me. All right. We'll call it quits. Jeremy? No Jeremy? Charlie's might not make an appearance tonight. She's probably taking a bath. Maybe next week I'll get her set up. Charlie's the best part. I'll let her know, and maybe she'll make an appearance next week. I'll have her down in maybe the beginning. She goes to bed around this time, so I'm gonna run upstairs and help out with that. All right, guys, we'll call it quits here. Thanks for, let me just end the recording. Thanks for attending. Have a nice day.